Hey everybody. Just getting on here, getting things going. I'm on YouTube and I'm on Facebook. Say hi when you log on. Tell me where you're from. It is Medium Monday, and Medium Monday is all about bokeh. We are going to learn how to do the bokeh technique using a stencil and some white pigment ink. And then we're going to transform that background into a beautiful card. Say hi when you log in. I'm a few minutes early. Hope everybody's having a good Monday night. Really not sure what I'm going to do with the card, but we're going to figure it out. We're just going to kind of roll with it. You know, that sort of thing. Short and sweet little card when we're done. All right, we got about 2 minutes before I get going. Tell me where you're from. A little bokeh. Here's what the bokeh looks like. This is using blues. And then I have one here that I did with some pinks and purples. Isn't that just so pretty? So we're going to learn how to do this quick little technique. We're going to be doing it in the blues, and these ones have dried, so they're ready to be transformed into something gorgeous. And we will transform it into something gorgeous tonight. All right, well, it looks like it is 7 o'clock. So tonight we're going to be doing the bokeh technique, and it is Medium Monday. So our medium that I am featuring to talk about is a white pigment ink. Now you can get a white pigment ink through Stampin' Up. This one happens to be through Lawn Fawn. I have several white pigment inks. I have the Lawn Fawn, and then I have, I'm looking here, I believe it's Hero Arts. The Hero Hues, that's another white pigment ink. And, oh, this is a white dye ink, so that's a little bit different, but okay. So I have 2 white pads. We're going to use the Lawn Fawn and a stencil. And so I made this stencil just with a piece of acetate and my Cricut I just cut a bunch of random size circles around it. I don't know if you can see those, if that helps a little bit. So I have circles of all sizes going on here. So we're going to use this stencil to make our bokeh. And bokeh is actually a photography type thing to kind of blur out the background. And so we're going to start off first by getting our cardstock ready. And this is just a standard piece of cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So it is certainly ready for a card front. And then I'm going to go ahead and tonight I'm using my glass mat by Tim Holtz. And I have 3 colors here. I'm going to, you need to start off with 3 colors. And I have Pacific Point, Bermuda Bay, and Coastal Cabana. And we'll like divide up our paper and ink sponge the background with these 3 colors first before we lay down any pigment ink. And it does take a little bit to dry. So let's go ahead and I have a different sponge brush for each color. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with the first color first, the darkest. And I'm going to go ahead and start sponging. So I'll get your ink and then just come in. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you're going to do about 1/3 of your background with this one color. And the darker and more vibrant that you make your background, the better it will look at the end. So don't be afraid to put down some ink, okay? It does take a little bit to dry, but you know, just take your time, do a good job. Okay, so I'm not going to close the Pacific Point pad. I'm just going to set it aside. And next I'm going to take the Bermuda Bay, get it inked up, and I'm just going to come in and sponge in some Bermuda Bay, filling in some of those gaps that I have. Then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to grab a sticky note here so I can put my fingers on the sticky note so I don't get my fingers all inky. So this is a full back sticky note, and I'll just stick it to my fingers. That way I can just kind of hold it down and not get ink on my fingers or fingerprints into my ink. Blend over the 2 colors so you don't have any gaps. So there we go. I'm going to set that color over here to the side. And next I'm going to grab my Coastal Cabana. And you don't want to mix your inks, so that's why I have a different sponge for each color. And I'm just going to fill in the rest of the white area on this so that I have a nice, completely blended background. And a little up here. There we are. And so if I were to do a ton of these, like if I were going to make these in like mass collection, I would definitely consider like doing all of the ink blending first and then coming back and adding the pigment ink, because the ink tends, if it's not completely dry, will transfer to your white ink pad and contaminate it. So I am going to just take my heat gun and I'm just going to heat set this ink that's already here. So hopefully I don't contaminate my white pigment ink pad any more than it already is. So just heat set that, let it dry. That should be good. All right. So now I've taken that, everything is all nice and dry. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring in my stencil with my white pigment pad. And this is the one, my dauber that I have been using with the white pigment ink on a blue background. So the dauber that I used on the pink background, I used a fresh dauber because I didn't want to transfer the blue onto the pink. So now we're going to just take and just to minimize the amount of contamination on my white pad, I'm just going to use the corner of it, okay? And then some of these circles are way too big for this background. So I'm going to probably go with this one first. And I'm just going to dab it around. And, you know, sponge it into this white, this circle here. So that when I pull this up, you can see I have just a white circle. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move the dauber around, and you can see, look at my ink pad is getting blue already. But we're just going to use the ink from that corner, and I'm going to add another circle. And then I'm going to move it over here, and I'm not re-inking, I'm just adding another half circle because this pigment ink really does go a long way. And there are many circle stencils out there. Like I have the Lawn Fawn bubble stencil. That one would certainly work. Like I said, I just created a bunch of random circles and cut them out with my Cricut on acetate for this one. And you could use like a Creative Memories circle cutter to create some sort of stencil. Some people make these stencils using vellum. You just want to space out your circles enough so that they aren't too close. So now you can see on my background I have 4 of the one size circles. So now I'm going to go down to the next size, and I'm just going to place it randomly and fill it in. And then I'm going to come over here randomly. Now all of this is supposed to be really random. Okay. All right. I'm going to overlap these two. So the idea is that you have some that are more white than others, and the ones that are brighter white tend to look like they are closer up in the foreground versus in the background. And I'm going to do some of these smaller ones, and you can tap or rub, whichever you prefer. But as they dry, they do tend to lighten. So you'll find that you take time to go back over some of the circles you already did because they've lightened so much, or they weren't as bright as they were originally when you put them down. And so we just keep going until you get the finished look that you're happy with. Now I'm going to go with some smaller ones. Give a good circle push there. This one is not very even, so I'm going to come back and I'm just going to line that up and give that another press. And bokeh is really the idea of blurring out that background. And then I have a much smaller one I'm going to work with here. And you want the bubbles to overlap, so you can really go as much or as little as you want. All right, so I think that looks good. And then now, because my sponge dauber is already round, I'm just going to take it and just place it in some random spots to pull out some extra white. Bring some a little bit further forward that we're not rubbed on. There we go. So as that dries, you know, it will eventually start to fade just a little bit. But I really do want to clean my ink pad. So I'm going to take a clean sponge dauber and I'm just going to rub this blue ink off as much as I can. And then I can go in and just use that ink to do a couple extra white dots, you know, because we don't want it to go to waste. And the randomness of the size is really important. All right. So now your background is essentially ready for putting on a card base or making a card. So I'm just going to take a baby wipe. I'm going to set that aside and I'm just going to wipe my surface down here. And I'm just going to take that same baby wipe and wipe off my stencil the best I can. It's not going to be perfect, but it's better than leaving all that ink on there. And of course, now it wants to stick, and then I'll set it aside to dry, and then after the live, I'll actually take it down to the sink and wash it with some hot water. So I tried to keep my fingers not so inky, but that didn't work so well. All right, so because I did this one a couple days ago, you know, they're pretty similar. This is the one I did a few days ago. This is the one I just did. I'm going to transform this panel into a card, and I'm going to let this dry for a day or two before I do anything with it. And I really don't know what I'm going to do with this card. I just was like, oh, I should probably make that into a card while I'm on the live. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this down because we know it started at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I'm going to cut this down to 4. No, I'm going to go even farther. I'm going to go 3.75 by 5. Okay. I have these two strips. I think I might add the longer one to the inside of the card, and I'm just going to use this part as my card base. And so my colors in here were Pacific Point, Bermuda Bay, and Coastal Cabana. I think that I am going to go get a piece of Pacific Point cardstock to make my card base out of. So let me go grab that. All right, here is just a standard 8.5 by 11 sheet of Pacific Point cardstock. And I know that I'm going to probably duplicate this card with my other background. So I'm going to take a second and I'm going to score it first on the 8.5 inch side. I'm going to score it all the way down at 4 1/4. The whole thing. Then I'm going to rotate it and I'm going to cut at 5.5 inches. So now what I end up with is 2 card bases. So when the other background is dry, I will be able to make it into a card as well. So I'm going to take my bone folder and I'm going to burnish these sides. I'm going to set this one to the side to do on another day. And now I have this much going on for my card base. Okay? And I really think I need a white background. So I'm going to take, here's a piece of white cardstock, and I'm going to cut it down to 4 by 5 1/4. And then I have a little white mat going on for this. So there we go. That is a standard card front. And then I pulled out this set and I thought, you know, this would be pretty easy to make a very simple and quick card because, you know, the background took a little bit of time. So I am going to heat emboss Hello Friend, and I like this branch, so I'm going to heat emboss that, and then on the inside I'll do a sentiment or something. So let's go ahead and we're going to set these 2 pieces aside, and I'm just going to work on this for just a second. I'll grab my white embossing powder. Like I said, this panel has been dry for a couple days, so I should be able to heat emboss it pretty easily. So I have my white embossing powder and my Versamark ink pad. And I'm going to grab a coffee filter. Just need one. And a block. Oh, that one's too small. Hello Friend. And then we'll use that block for that one. There we go. All right, so first I am going to take my embossing powder, or my anti-static powder, and I'm just going to put some anti-static powder all over the background because I don't want that white embossing powder sticking in places. I don't want the white embossing powder. Then I'm going to go ahead and ink up my Hello Friend, and I think maybe I want it this way. No, I think I'll do it this way. Hello Friend. Right here. Give it a good press. And then I'm going to take this branch and I'm just going to come in off the side and off the side over here. And I can kind of see that where that ink is. I know it's kind of hard to see on camera. I'm going to put the ink pad over there to the side. I'm going to set my panel right there. Grab my white embossing powder. And I'm going to just generously sprinkle this all over that. Now the benefit of having it into the white, the coffee filter, is that I'll be able to pour it all right back in to my container with little to no mess. So done, done, and done. Okay? So that's where we're at so far. It's going to be so, so pretty. Give my heat tool a second to heat up. And see, you can just kind of watch that white powder turn bright white as it melts. Now, you would not be able to do this heat embossing if that background was not dry, because that pigment ink stays wet for quite a while. And so, because this got to sit and dry for a few days, I knew it was safe to heat emboss. So this is definitely a process, so it's not one that you want to rush. All right, I'm going to take my glue, put glue on the back of my white piece. Center that. Put glue on the back of my background panel. There we go. Give it a good rub. Now I'm going to take this other half of this white sheet of cardstock and I'm going to cut it down to 4 by 5 1/4, just like I did for the front piece. And I'm going to take another stamp from this set that says, "I miss you a lot." And we're going to stamp that with some black ink. And then I'm going to take this branch and I'm also going to stamp it there we go. And I did get ink on my glass mat, so I'm just going to grab a baby wipe here so I can wipe that off, because I don't want that ink getting on things. All right, so there's that. Give that a second to dry. Okay. Now we have the inside of our card done. Add some glue. Center it on the inside. Gives it that nice finished look. Now I'm back to the front and I'm going to grab my rhinestones that are sitting right here on my desk and my take your pick tool. And I think I'm going to add probably about 5 rhinestones. 1 big, 2 of the medium, and 3 of the small. And I'm just going to add them randomly. You know, no specific place at all. And there we go. We have a finished card ready to pop in the mail using white pigment ink and a new technique. So I hope that you enjoyed my video. And tomorrow night is Tips and Tricks Tuesday. I will be demonstrating some how to cut paper for mats for A2 size cards. So I hope that you enjoyed my video tonight. I look forward to jumping on tomorrow night. I'm hoping 7 o'clock is going to work for me and everybody else. So I look forward to seeing you. You guys have a wonderful evening. And don't forget, that's incredible.